I see Mr. Thornton has joined us, so right now on the screen, I can see Teresa, Amy, Doug, Jackie, John, Pat, Juan, Alan, a symbol for Alyssa, Danny's iPad, Mary Yont, Tina, engineer, intern, who is that?
That's probably Daryl.
Daryl, okay.
No, that we actually have had an engineering intern all summer, and I asked her to join us. Next week's actually her last week.
Ah, shame.
She's been helping us out this summer and doing a nice job.
Great.
Okay, I see a section for Bill.
Bill Rourke is our consultant with McGill, who is working with us on the, he and Alyssa with McGill will be doing a presentation on the AIA reports.
Okay. What was his last name again, please?
Rourke, O-R-O-A-R-K.
Okay. Tina. There's a couple just phone numbers down here.
Yeah, I saw.
The 1151 is my phone. I'm just using a different camera.
And is 1114 Daryl?
That would be
Kenny.
Kenny.
That'd be Kenny.
Kenny.
Kenny. All right. With that sufficing as our roll call, we'll go ahead and get started. Does everyone have an agenda? Did everyone get that?
No, in the email.
In the email, yeah, Alan sent it out.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. Let's see.
Well, I'll read mine. It just says that, welcome, get the meeting started. Welcome all people participating and recognize those. Item 2 is discussion of City Road Resurfacing Initiative and NCDOT's plans for our area. Item 3 is discussion of NCDEQ offer of funding to City for Oxford and the WWTP rehabilitation. And then item 4 is the AIA information presentation. Is that the PowerPoint that you mentioned, Alan?
Yeah, Bill will be sharing that with us.
Yeah. Okay, and then anything else comes up on that. So first of all, Alan and Amy, thank y'all very much for getting this information out. Good information to have had in our hands so we could get ready for this meeting. So at this point, Alan, I'll turn it over to you to get us started.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. And thank you to everyone Zooming in today. We've got most of the board. That's great. First item on the agenda is the road resurfacing. I hope everybody had an opportunity to read and view some of the information that I sent out, including information from the DOT about their plans, because their plans, like we've been discussing for the past, gracious, quite some extended period of time, have been all over the place. Up until this week, whatever the last date on the information we received from the DOT that we had, was that the Department of Transportation was shelving their plans to do some work here in Oxford, Granville County. And then we got notice very quickly that they had reversed course and intend to go forward with their plans here in Oxford and Granville County to do road work. So the map that I sent to you from the DOT kind of hopefully detailed a lot of that information as to where they're going and what they intend to do. And where is mine? Here it is. It wasn't color coded and there wasn't a legend on it, but if you see it, got it. The solid lines are basically DOT roads that are in the resurfacing initiative that the DOT is going to undertake. Are we still here? Okay.
Yeah, I can still hear you.
Yeah, as long as you can still hear me. My screen just kind of freaked out there for a second. But the There we go. And the hatched marks are our streets that we were talking about piggybacking along with the DOT. If you remember all those conversations that we had had for the past year or two about potentially piggybacking along with the Department of Transportation on a number of streets that were to be impacted by utility projects and water and sewer line installation. I'll let really Amy kind of get into that when I finish. She can kind of convey to you some additional information regarding those projects and where we are, because the timing of those projects and where we are is impacting plans that we may have to move forward with a road resurfacing, a municipal road resurfacing initiative for this current fiscal year. Now, it's my understanding right now with the Department of Transportation, what their plans are is that they plan to secure bids, let the project for this resurfacing this fall, and into 2021 is when they will be doing that resurfacing. Now, what that means is that we don't know specifically exactly when they're going to be here. Best indication that we can probably take from this and reason from it is that they would potentially begin at the soonest in the April time frame. That's when you're going to start to get the weather to warm up. But we also understand that this Granville resurfacing initiative is not just inclusive of Oxford, that it is going to be throughout Granville County in areas that they've identified that need work. So what that may mean is there could be some potential timing there when they come to the Oxford area to do their work, that we can potentially work with them to get a little bit farther along on a couple of projects that we're working on and trying to complete. And I'll let Amy chime in on that. And there are two specific roads at this point in time that we are really trying to work with the Department of Transportation on to try to get some things cleared up and move forward with the utility work to be prepared to best take advantage of what we had always hoped to do, which was to get the utilities in the ground before resurfacing is done so that nobody comes back in and then digs them back up. And we all look like a bunch of crazy people who couldn't plan well. And we're still trying to do that to the best of our ability. But knowing that the Department of Transportation wants to come and get on with their Division 5 work, which is Granville County and Oxford, and the situation with revenue and the revenue coming into the Department of Transportation and how quickly things change at the DOT, which has already been exhibited from their reversal, we do not want them to bypass us any further. So as you can see from the map that the DOT provided, what they are planning to do is pretty darn extensive. I mean, they're going to do a lot of road work in Oxford, which will make a significant impact here in Oxford on the condition of a number of roads that people assume are Oxford's. Now, what we really want to talk about today is just how much of a project that we want to do for municipal streets. And in talking about how much we want to do, we also need to understand, what we have available and what we have the means to do. And by means, I mean money. And currently we have $282,000 and some odd change in our Powell Bill Fund. And we will be receiving a disbursement in October of this year from the Powell Bill Division, which will help build those coffers a little bit more. For some perspective on how far that goes, we spent $732,000, I believe, roughly, in the last resurfacing initiative that we did this past year. And we resurfaced 2.2 miles. That's what we did for what we expended. So it tells you, how much money that it takes to do this work. And of course, some roads are more expensive than others based upon what we have to do. Some of them we just can't go out there and put pavement down. We have to mill and do other things, which ups the price per mile of those streets. So, looking at it and trying to get the biggest bang for the buck and making sure that we cover as much as we possibly can, and then to prioritize everything, as well as trying to coordinate efforts with the DOT, has kind of been a bit of a moving target, and it's been a little bit difficult for us to pin down because the Department of Transportation has been back and forth and all over the place. I will also convey to you that what I sent out to you this morning confirms that the roundabout project or traffic circle on Spring and Main is going to be a part of the DOT's package. And that was one of the things that I wanted to make sure that was going to continue, and had to ask the question to someone different, because someone different is in charge of that project, because the money comes from a different area or different pot of DOT funds. So we will be working to make sure that that coordination remains, and that project takes place as well in 2021 when the DOT comes in. So that being said, I will also remind everyone that when we were talking about doing a larger project, we were talking about borrowing money in order to do this, and then using the revenue proceeds that come in from PAL bill disbursement on an annual basis to make those debt service payments. As you know, people are traveling less with the pandemic going on. And with the traveling less, 3/4 of what we receive in revenue for PAL bill funding is based upon gas tax and sales of gasoline and other highway fuels, diesel fuel. So I anticipate that there will be a decline in the amount of those revenues that will impact, our PAL bill fund. How much that is at this point in time, I can't tell you. And we had, if you recall, a little more than a year ago, had gone out to our local banking institutions, and basically with a request for proposals as to how much we could borrow and what interest rates. And we had determined at that time that BB&T was going to give us the best offer, and we had discussed that with the committee and the full board, and we were kind of preparing to move forward with that. And then we kind of backed up and did a smaller project. If $732,000 is small, but what we really need to do, I believe, at this point in time is kind of reassess where we are and where we want to go, and determine where our money, depending upon how much we believe we can handle, because not everything that we receive PAL bill funds for is expended on resurfacing and road work. There are a few other items in there that we utilize PAL bill funding for, including work on sidewalks. Anytime we have a street cut, the gravel and the patching and things like that is done comes out of that fund as well. Fortunately, a couple of years ago, I kind of changed the way the PAL bill expenditures were going to incorporate more of what should be in there versus, in my opinion, what shouldn't. And we now really dedicate pretty much all of the money we get from PAL bill to PAL bill specific purposes, more for roads. And so we will have monies available. How much? I think we're roughly going to be looking at around $400-some thousand by the time we get our disbursement in, and we'll have to utilize that to continue to maintain the operations of the PAL bill fund itself, as well as factoring in the debt service should we decide to go back and seek some funds from somewhere, a banking institution, in order to do a larger project. So that being said, I'm going to let Amy kind of chime in. She's been flipping back and forth with all the wonderful maps and graphics, and see if I've missed anything. Amy, have I missed anything?
Mute.
Yeah, I was trying to get the unmute button. As Alan mentioned, this was the map that everyone received that DOT provided to us. The other two maps that I was flipping between are where McGill actually went in and highlighted the roads where work is being done, whether it's the USDA Wooten project or the DWI water projects that McGill is working on with us. And then another map, second map for the sewer projects. The two streets that Alan briefly touched on that we have some concern about are, well, we'll start with, we have done a great job with getting the utilities in, and the water line, as y'all are pretty well aware, has gone down Main Street. We're wrapping up the work there. Work has been completed on Spring Street, Front Street, Henderson Street. We did the work on Broad Street, and so we have been going through the areas where DOT is going to be resurfacing and completing those projects. The two projects that we have that are outstanding are a portion of Pine Tree Road for our water, and on the sewer is Main Street. I think everybody's very eager to see Main Street resurfaced, because one of the things DOT said is that if we don't have the utilities done on those streets, they could just skip them and come back in their next resurfacing project, which may be 5-10 years from now, we don't know. So Bill and Alyssa have been brainstorming with me to try to determine how we can make sure that those projects are complete prior to DOT doing their resurfacing initiative. One of our holdups, ironically, is DOT is not giving us our encroachments to move forward with bidding the projects. So DOT wants us out of the road with the utility work, but they are holding us up. So we are pursuing trying to correct that challenge and let them, chime in on seeing the light that they need to assist us in being able to complete these projects prior to their resurfacing taking place. Pine Tree Drive Road, we can likely put the water line down the shoulder of the road and be out of the pavement if necessary as an alternative. Main Street, however, we don't have an option. That's got to go down the roadway. That project is ready to be bid as long as we can get DOT's approval to move forward with it. So one of the other things that we are discussing with DOT, if you go back to the original map they provided and the dashed lines that are the city versus the solid lines that are DOT, one of the reasons we had Goshen Street on here is that, DOT was doing a section in the middle. Originally on Goshen Street, we've got a whole list of the streets if we want to look at that, but my computer is not moving as fast as I am. DOT had originally said they were going to do Goshen Street on beyond Roxborough Road. So that was one of the reasons we had included that in the road work that we wanted done, because it would have been DOT, city, DOT, city. And so we're doing a hop, skip, jump paving method. And most residents don't recognize that this part of the road is DOT. This part of the road is the city. Oh, we're back on DOT road. Nope, we're back on city road. And so that isn't going to escape their, most residents are not going to realize that. And Spring and McClanahan are the other two streets that are like that. Spring Street starts at Williamsboro and is DOT until you get about to Cooper. I believe it's Cooper. Then it's a city street, and then picking up at Main, going on back out to Lewis, it's DOT again. On McClanahan, it is DOT in the vicinity of ABC, and then it is City Street, and then it goes back to DOT again. So we have suggested that we have a call with DOT after we talk with the Public Works Committee to see, is there a way to maybe address those 3 streets, especially McClanahan and Spring, that are more in the center of town. So those are a couple items that I don't think Alan touched on, but briefly, that I wanted to make y'all aware of. So, you know, and as Alan said, DOT has come back and said, you know, we really don't think the piggybacking project will work, but they're trying to scoot our project in ahead of Raleigh. We're in the same division as Raleigh, and Raleigh does not have their ducks in a row to do their resurfacing work. And if we remove the city portion from the DOT project, they have their part of the Granville County project ready to go out the door. And if we can get our project out the door first, then, you know, we will get the resurfacing done next year. If Raleigh beats us to the bid process, then our project could be delayed back to the indefinite time frame. So, you know, looking at, do we really want to push a piggybacking project that may put us out indefinitely? Or do we want to go ahead with letting DOT say, you know, move forward, they do a project, we do a project, and work with McGill on the 2 streets that we still have not gotten the utilities on. So that's where we're really, you know, sitting at this point in time.
Yep, and I will add to that that again, you know, we really don't want to slow the DOT down again if we can possibly avoid that, because we do not know when they will be back and how much money they will have to expend in this rural area where we don't seem to have quite the priority as some other areas. And that is my fear. But what Amy touched upon is, you know, one of the probably the centerpiece of the conversation that we need to have is that if we are interested in adjusting what we had previously talked about in order to take care of McClanahan and Goshen and Spring so that there won't be any pavement gaps, or even looking at it from the perspective of condition gaps in the road, it would cause us to alter a bit the priority schedule that we had already looked at. So that's the conversation that we really need to have this morning or this afternoon now with this committee about what do you want staff to do as far as that bit of a dilemma, which is going to really kind of change what we had looked at previously and kind of change how much we can do. Mr. Chairman, that is really kind of the conversation that needs to be led this morning so that staff understands a direction, and from that direction we can develop that list based upon what we believe we can accomplish. And the other part of the conversation is, you know, just how much do we feel comfortable in seeking financing for. So it's kind of a two-headed question there for this committee to start conversing about in regards to a paving initiative for the city of Oxford.
Amy, let me ask just couple of quick questions.
Yes, sir.
I saw in there that a request for a phone conversation with you after this meeting.
Correct.
Is that topic of where the gaps are that we do a part and they do a part be the primary part of that?
It definitely will be. I'm having conversations with the Durham staff as well as the local Granville County staff at DOT. And the local staff here, you know, based in just outside of Oxford, certainly understands our position and agrees with us that they don't want to see that patchwork paving either. Now, how we can make that happen, we don't know at this point in time. And the Durham staff are who we really have to have the conversation with to make it work. But hopefully, since the Granville staff and Oxford, or Granville DOT staff and Oxford are in agreement, maybe DOT will let us either pay their contractor directly to do that work. Maybe they will just encompass that work with their project. And if we were really lucky, they might just go ahead and pay for it. But I'm not holding my breath on that option. But I think that they see the common sense of neither entity is going to look very good if we have that patchwork paving, but we're certainly going to have that conversation.
The other just, I guess is a silly question, but for me, does DOT understand that they are urging us to continue with this project while at the same time being a hindrance?
I think that's a question about the right hand doesn't always know what the left hand is doing. I have already sent an email that included both the staff that handles the encroachments and staff that are working on the resurfacing. And I'm about to follow that up with another phone call and or email because I didn't get any response to the first one. And I know Bill and Alyssa have on more than one occasion reached out to DOT trying to push this issue as well. It's ironic, but yeah.
Danny and Teresa, I welcome your comments. My first reaction is I would like to see us avoid the patchwork paving unless something can be worked out. And I realize that cause us to have to backtrack on some other plans that we have made. But welcome your comments at this point.
I agree. I don't think it will be in our best interest to do the backtracking and the patchwork stuff. And just looking at the streets that this is going on, I think it would create other issues too. I mean, so if we're going to be able to do this, we should figure out how to make it a cohesive as possible.
Agreed.
So.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you all, both of y'all. And looking at Goshen, it's not a lot that we have to add from Ivy Day to Quail Ridge. It's not a big section, probably of quite a bit of money. But so what we would do would be go back and take our list and reprioritize what we plan to do.
That's my understanding, yes.
I think you have to. I mean, you can't carry on putting the citizens of Oxford through all this turmoil every couple of years. Let's just try and do it now. I know it's going to cost money. I know we're going to have to borrow money to do it, but I can't see the quality of life for the citizens of Oxford is not going to be good if you're going to surface some and then dig up some more, then 2 years time the road or 10 years or 3 years or whatever the DOT decide. Let's Amy and Alan get on with the DOT and come to some cohesive date that we can get this done.
What exactly are we giving up by incorporating Goshen Spring and McClanahan Street? What would have been the priority if they were not in the mix?
Honestly, at this point in time, that's something we would have to take a look at the list and evaluate because it's going to depend upon a number of factors, including how much money we're willing to spend on our project. We're going to do as much as we possibly can, and I do believe that what Amy mentioned is the fact that we're going to be doing our own project and not piggybacking on the DOT. And the reason that we were always talking about piggybacking with the DOT was to save money or get the biggest bang for our buck, believing that by utilizing the contractor in Oxford at the time doing the DOT resurfacing initiative, we could get more done. One of the small silver linings to all of this, I believe, is that pavement contractors will be hungry for work, and we'll get a decent bid on our project as far as the pricing, for yards of asphalt and those types of things. Hopefully, we will get a very good bid because of the economic climate and the fact that a lot of these contractors don't have the amount of work that they would have, and they'll be giving us a good bid, which will mean we can extend this as far as we possibly can down the priority list. As you know, the city of Oxford certainly has more streets on its priority listing than it has funds to do work upon. So there, and that's always going to be the case. Of the what it is, 32 miles, I believe, or something like that, that's on the city's maintenance schedule for streets. Streets are in various condition. The city, unfortunately, hadn't done a lot of road resurfacing, in my opinion, in a number of years, which has continued to lead to some of the condition of the streets that we drive upon every day, which is why we're trying to begin doing more to address this. But there's going to always be a need, to do street work. That's just the way that it is in a municipality where you have responsibility for streets. And different streets wind up costing different amounts of money based upon the condition that they're in to fix them. And that was part of what we looked at when we talked about the priority listing, and it listed every street and its condition. And, the worst ones are the ones you got to totally rebuild. And we have a few of those, and they're very expensive to do. So, you're not just out there doing ribbon paving, putting down, an inch and a half of asphalt and moving on. You're really doing a lot of very expensive, time-consuming work, and you do not get your dollar stretched as far as it would if you're just putting down asphalt. Then you kind of get into what we've experienced around town with that first round of funding. Take High Street, for example, where you had curb and gutter, and you had to mill it in order to resurface. That's not cheap either. It's not just ribbon paving like what you're going to see the bulk of what the DOT is going to be doing on a number of those state roads. They'll just be resurfacing and coming in the next day and striping it and moving on. Some of the work that we do in the city of Oxford with our streets is a little bit more intensive as far as what it requires in order to be resurfaced and then left for a period of time before any work comes back again. So essentially what we will be doing is, if this committee is in agreement and the board is in agreement, is reevaluating the position of where we are and what the priority listing is, accommodating or taking into account McClanahan, Spring, and Goshen Street to avoid those gaps. And I agree with the committee that it'll just look ridiculous to go out there and go from nice fresh asphalt to doing this kind of thing, hitting a nice new stretch of asphalt, because like Amy mentioned, people don't know that it's DOT or NC or city street. They just think it's Oxford. So it does not make any sense to do that, and we probably do need to incorporate that. And if we incorporate that, that's going to change your priority list, and it's going to change how far your dollars are going to be able to go. So we would need to reassess that, redo that listing, and get that information back to you. And during that period of time, we will be reinitiating contact with the financial institution that we had already had contact with, and refirm the lending rate and the desire to work with the city of Oxford to do just that. That's kind of where we're at this afternoon.
What was the negotiation with BB&T at the time? What did it look like?
Is Hawk still on here? I've forgotten the numbers, but it was around, I want to say 2.3%. Am I off there, Hawk? Are you here with us?
Yes, sir.
For how much money?
It was $1 million.
Yes.
Yeah, we were talking about borrowing $1 million.
Okay.
And
The rate should be,
I would still be in favor of borrowing as much as we could. I know with this right now with the COVID, it's hurting us, but I hope to God it ain't gonna last for the next 5 years. If it does, we ain't gonna be using the street the whole lot anyway. So,
Yeah, we'll be lost everything by then.
yeah, so we ain't gonna be the only one going down the drain, but, I would still be in favor of borrowing as much as we could, because when you got a list and you got 40 streets on it, and we put Goshen and McClanahan and Spring, and we drop off 40 through 35, those people are gonna be mad.
Yeah,
So we need to take care of as many as we can.
Okay, I hear you. What we will do is basically get you the numbers again based upon borrowing X amount of dollars and give you a couple of options. And we'll bring that to you along with the revised listing. And hopefully by then we will have had the conversation with the DOT and know a little bit more about what Amy just discussed. And we'll know a little bit more and be a little bit better prepared to move forward as quickly as we possibly can.
Can I ask a question or two? And I agree with everything that everybody has just said. Was it an absolute across the board from DOT that there will absolutely be no piggybacking, or was it, we are prepared to move forward with this and we don't want to be slowed down by your trying to add piggybacking? I wanted to understand that piece, and then I have a follow-up question.
They were pretty adamant that the piggybacking would put us behind Raleigh, and that we would then be rolling the dice as to when our project would be done, or if there was money left after they did Raleigh to do anything with Granville County.
Okay, so it's really like if you try to add anything to this project, this is going to change where you are in the order. So, because my follow-up was going to be, do we need to try to leverage anybody in the General Assembly to say, come on, let them do these 3 streets, or no?
I think the 3 streets, they have said we can't piggyback the project. The 3 streets that we're trying to still include would not necessarily be considered our piggyback.
Okay.
We would work out some unique arrangement, which we've been pretty good at. Oxford's been pretty good at working out unique arrangements with most of our other government entities and funding agencies that we've been working with. So hopefully they'll let us be creative and do something that will allow us to include it, whether it's we pay their contractor directly to do that work. And then we'd have to look at, what the bidding requirements are. If we can do this under an informal bid where that's allowed by the state, which doesn't require all the steps that a standard bid would require. Now, what this will look like, we don't know until we have the conversation with DOT, but wanted to make sure that the board wished to pursue moving forward. Tell DOT, yes, move forward with your project. We will do our own project independently, and then look at where we can maybe work together on those 3 streets. And maybe even scale back Goshen where, we just do the portion that's more in town, not looking at from Ivy Day back to Roxborough, because their DOT's not doing outside of, on the north side of Roxborough like it was originally shown. So that wouldn't be as much of the patchwork paving if they're not doing that work out there. And depending on where our funds are, it may be, as Alan said, contractors are hungrier. We might be able to include everything because, they really want to work and sharpen their pencil.
So it doesn't sound like there's any point in trying to go to anybody else to see if somebody could put in a good word for us. It sounds to me like you've got a great handle on it. And I, for one, really appreciate everything that you're doing. And the other comment I would make is if we get to the point where some streets do have to be bumped, that we get a great set of talking points that everybody on the board can make sure we're communicating with the community about how everything, you know, has changed and it hasn't been completely under our control. But thank you.
Yeah.
Yep, we appreciate it. And I'll also say this, and I'm just thinking out loud a little bit, that, you know, if we are fortunate and do this thing in a certain fashion, and hopefully the ducks would then fall in a row, so to speak, to allow us to bid our project along the same timeline that the selected contractor that the DOT has doing work in Oxford and Granville County would be one of the potential bidders, which would therefore allow them to really sharpen their pencil, because they're going to be already mobilized in the Granville County and Oxford area and receive the low bid and do the work potentially close to the same time. So there is always, I believe, that opportunity if we are fortunate enough and smart enough and things work out to where those ducks do fall in a row, then we can do that and capitalize on that, that we could do more work, because the price would then be less by having a contractor not have to mobilize from, you know, Rocky Mount or wherever they would be coming from to do that work. But that's something yet to be seen based upon a few things getting ironed out and falling into place.
I have a question. Amy, didn't you say Raleigh was not quite as well prepared or as we are in going ahead with their project, or did I misunderstand?
That is correct. They do not have their bidding documents essentially ready to go. And, you know, back to a comment the mayor made, if we reach out to anybody to ask for them to put in a good word, it could grind everything to a halt. Well, that discussion was had. But right now, Granville County went forward even when the pandemic started and said, we will put all of our information together, and so it's ready if we put it on the shelf. Raleigh did not do that or did not have the time to do that, and so they still have to put their package together. So if we take, you know, tell DOT move forward and then take advantage of the fact that DOT staff in Granville County was a little better prepared than Raleigh, we will be winners, I think.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll clarify that just a little bit. And Amy, correct me if I'm wrong, but when she speaks of Raleigh, she's speaking of the DOT division that covers Raleigh, Wake County, and not the city of Raleigh.
Yeah.
Okay. Are we ready to move on to the funding discussion?
I think so, unless anyone has any question. I think we kind of understand each other and where we want to go, and I do appreciate all the members of the board seeing like sign. I do find it humorous that Amy used common sense and DOT together there like that. That's kind of like jumbo shrimp. But
I'd like to thank Amy and the engineering department, all the staff on there, for putting this together and being so far ahead of Raleigh. I mean, I think we've got an excellent department, and I appreciate it very much.
We try. Thank you very much. We appreciate that.
Let's move on, please, to the discussion of the NCDEQ offer for funding.
All right, Amy, I'll kick it off, and I'll very quickly let you take it, because this is really Amy's baby as far as what we've been doing. If you recall, I forget exactly when we came before the board, but it was prior to the submission date for the spring round of funding available that DEQ has. I sent you a copy of the letter of intent to fund. Hope everybody had an opportunity to take a look at that. But if you recall, we came before the board and had conversation about some issues that the wastewater treatment plant was having and was continuing to have, and that we believe was going to get worse and not get better into the future, and some real needs out there. And the board in its infinite wisdom said, yes, apply and see what we get. And we did. And you have the results of that in front of you in the letter, which basically makes available to us should the Board of Commissioners accept a little over $6 million for some real upgrades and modernization of our wastewater treatment plant, which I think everybody understands is an absolute must and necessity for us to have operating to the best of its ability to accommodate, this development that we have on the horizon, as well as to take care of what we currently have. Again, just like what we're talking about with resurfacing streets in Oxford, it's not cheap. And I think we understand that. But the other part of that is that it sure isn't going to get any cheaper to make these improvements. And we certainly don't want to see some of these things fail and cause us to be in violation. And they well could. I'll just put it to you bluntly. So we received an offer to fund based upon where we fell in the point rating that the EQ goes through in order to rate all of these projects. I didn't send you this, but it is a rather lengthy document of all the people that applied for funding in this round of funding. And it was extensive, several pages of this, but Oxford, where was it? We came in well enough to essentially receive an offer of $500,000 in grant funding, which is the principal forgiveness, and scored high enough to receive 0% interest offer on the remainder of that $6,062,000 for this. So, as part of it now that we've been offered the funding, we've got to decide if we want to accept it. And that's really about where we are right now. As you recall, we also talked to the board about seeking some funding, and I've forgotten the acronym, and Amy can help me with that in a second, to basically move the electrical building that is down there, because there was a pot of funding from Hurricane Michael and the disaster assistance and all of that. Unfortunately, they chose not to provide an offer good enough that the city believes that we would accept. We felt like we had a very strong case to get significant grant funding for that. That was not the case. It was scored relatively well, but there was no grant funding as part of that offer. And so we've kind of backed up and punted on that, and we'll be looking at that to potentially reapply for at some point in time in the future. But we did receive an offer of a little over $6 million to make some upgrades there, and Amy's got some pictures up, and she can kind of go over what those improvements would be if we accept this funding, and then we'll have some conversation amongst the committee about ramifications of accepting the offer and what it means. So Amy, take it.
Well, Bill and Alyssa that are on here, also the three of us spent many a evening, day and night, weekend trying to put these applications together, and certainly appreciate their assistance. And Alan touched on the fact that we were actually awarded 2 funding opportunities with the Division of Water Infrastructure out of the hundreds of applicants that applied, and about $78 million was available. And if you combine the 2 projects, we received an offer for almost $10 million. As Alan said, we feel like we have an opportunity with the electrical building, maybe at some point in the future, to get a more grant related funding. And so we've really not looking at moving on that project. But if you recall the discussions we had previously about the inflow and infiltration, I&I issues that the plant has, and when we have a heavy rainfall event, the average plant flow is approximately 1 million gallons a day, and our meter quits registering at 13.7 million gallons. And one of our biggest restrictions out at the plant is the filter system that really probably designed correctly would be about the best way I could put that. And we need to add a third filter out there to accommodate the flow that the plant was actually designed for, and then to additionally, handle these peaks that we have during the I&I. Other improvements that we needed to make out there and deal with the oxidation ditch. There's a picture of it on your screen, where the the drives that push the liquid around that circular basin, they are old. The variable frequency drives are not working and going out. We've already had one that has gone out. One of our return activated sludge pumps systems, it dates back, I'm wanting to say 30 years, Bill, does that sound correct? We replaced one when the project, the plant undertook upgrades in 2006, but the other one was not upgraded. Our SCADA system has been in need of improvements. We don't have nearly the number of alarms and alerts that let us know when something is going wrong, and allowing us to react to it before we have an issue that involves a spill and state involvement. There are numerous small items also included in this work that we want to get accomplished in order to really just keep the plant operating where it should be. This doesn't add any additional capacity to the plant, but we are trying to avoid notices of violation and potential fines, because the plant really needs to be able to operate and handle the I&I that's coming in. Obviously, we hope that these sewer projects that we are doing around town will help that I&I get reduced, but that is a lengthy process, getting outfalls replaced, and it's going to be chipping away to reduce that I&I, and it's not something that we'll ever be able to get rid of. So we're hopeful that this rehabilitation project will put us in a position for future expansion, which, depending on where Oxford goes and whether we get interest in Triangle North and other locations, new subdivisions coming in, that's something that we will have to look at an expansion, and we want everything that's existing to be in the best shape as it can be when we move on to the next project, to keep the second project costs down. Did I miss anything, Bill and Alyssa, that you feel like might need to be touched on? And do I have any questions on what I threw out there? Because there was a lot of information, and I was looking for some of the pictures that I showed y'all last time, and I'm not putting my hands on them at the moment, but if you recall, like the filter, the picture down here in this corner, those filter beds, went up so high they overflowed actually out of the filter beds themselves. And the plant was, because we don't have the alarm system, when they started overflowing and the wastewater was going back to the intake at the beginning of the plant, basically what was happening is everything was going in a circle round and round the plant, and we didn't realize it, and it caused the plant to actually overflow. Things like that, we certainly want to put in place some fairly logical fixes that, it would have been nice to have the first round, but we are where we are, and we want to try to give get the best product out that we can.
I had a question, Amy.
Yes,
The
sir.
discussion about moving the electrical building, is the electrical building in a location that puts it in jeopardy? Is that why we're trying to move? Are we trying to move it to a safer place, higher place? What's the whole rationale behind moving that building?
The relocation of that building is because it is in the 100-year floodplain, and the acronym that Alan couldn't come up with was a SODRA, which dealt with municipalities that were impacted by Florence or Michael. And they presented one thing in the training, and Bill and I have discussed this, that what they came out with when they did the awards did not match what the information provided in the training indicated that we could potentially get 100% grant for relocating that electrical building. We came back and they gave us a 100% loan, which would be a low interest loan. It would not be a 0% interest loan, and no principal forgiveness or no grant. And so we felt that, you know, there would be an opportunity in the future to move that. We have not, knock on wood, had that building flood yet. We had it come extremely close earlier this year. We actually pulled the sandbags out and had them ready to place out there. And, you know, hopefully, you know, we won't have an issue where it does flood before we have an opportunity to relocate it.
Amy,
Yes, ma'am.
well, Quan, did you have any more questions? I don't want to cut you off.
No,
No, I didn't have any other questions.
Okay.
Mhm.
You mentioned with the replacement of some of these things and the need at some point way down in the future for expansion, are some of the improvements that are proposed for this round now, would they be able to handle a larger size plant if we expand, or anything that we do is for what we've got right now, and when there's an expansion, then we relook at everything later?
Well, with the addition of the filter, and we had to be extremely careful when we were putting in the application, because if we indicated that there was any additional capacity being added to the plant, we would not have gotten the $500,000 principal forgiveness in our scoring system. Now, that third filter will certainly, you know, add to the ability to handle flow in the future, and maybe instead of having to add 2 or 3 filters, it might be 1 or 2 in the future. So, and the filter improvements that we do to the 2 existing filters. So we very carefully worded the, you know, application that we're adding no capacity, but that doesn't mean that it won't be beneficial to us in the future.
But
And this-
right now, it's for, these are to handle the phenomenal amount of water that comes through when we have this extraordinary rain events.
That's correct. And some of the items that were, you know, SCADA that is out of date, that is the brains of the system, and the ability to monitor the plant on weekends and evenings when there is nobody there, and have alarms let us know if something is going wrong. So it's a variety of, you know, upgrades and rehab, but, you know, the SCADA improvements are something that we can certainly build on when a plant expansion is done. But we need to get a SCADA system that's, you know, it's a computer. Imagine if your computer was 15 years old, 16 years old. It's, you know, not going to be functional. So, you know, certainly this is things that need to be upgraded.
Great. Thank you very much.
Mayor, excuse me. I've just had something to come up. My wife fell earlier today, and we just got word that the doctor is available to see her. So I'm going to have to leave and take her to either doctor's office or wherever we need to take her for her knee. But I would say that I would support this funding, going for this funding for the improvements in the existing facility. So, Mr. Rourke, Ms. Coyne, I apologize for leaving, but I got to go take care of my wife.
Oh, gosh, please, we'll all be praying that she's going to be okay.
Thank you.
All right, appreciate
Amy,
that.
I had a question.
Yes, ma'am, sir.
The loan, not the principal, forgive, that's the grant, the zero interest loan, how many years is that?
That is a 20-year loan, similar
20
to the
years.
other Division of Water Infrastructure, DWI loans that we received.
Okay,
So
that's
would-
all.
So would it be fair to say, following up on Commissioner Curran's question, that with further communication with the board about this, we could know what the anticipated debt service payment would look like for this and how it would add into what we already have going on?
If you give me a minute, I can tell you how much the debt service payment would be, and we can.
Amy, it's
Expected-
roughly 23,000 a month.
it-
That's rough, ballpark.
And it would be a yearly payment like the other ones.
So that,
So-
yep. Go ahead.
No, go on, Danny.
No, I was gonna say that's around 260,000 a year.
The affordability, that's part of the application process because DWI wants to make sure that if they provide the money that the recipient has the ability to pay it back. So there's calculations that go into the application process to say, yes, this is affordable for the community.
So is it safe to assume, Alan and Hawk and Bill, that with respect to all the work that we've done, because I know that that's always been a big concern for many board members, that we don't take on any more debt than is healthy for the city? And I know we've done a lot of work with our water and sewer rates. So how does this feed in, this additional payment, to everything else in terms of affordability for us?
Well, we're certainly watching and monitoring that very carefully, constantly. As you recall, the city board had basically set out on a course to do over $100 million, or darn close to $100 million in overall water and sewer rehab projects throughout the city. We're about halfway through that now. With the 6 million, you'll be very close to halfway. And a part of that decision at the time, and what continues to drive that, was the city's ability to pay for it and a plan to pay for it, along with regular increases. We've not had increases in water and sewer rates for residential in the last 3 years. We've been able to kind of hold that off and not utilize that Raftellus proposal at that time. This will be plugged in to that 100 million, and we believe we'll manage it based upon the board's sticking with that plan, sticking with that program. So what that means clandestinely is that you may not have the luxury to continue to not have rate increases in the future. So there you go. It's on the screen now, what we're looking at.
Right.
And Alan is correct. When we put together, the Raftellus, as most of you are aware, is who we are working with on the rates. And, they plug in on our CIP. And the next part of our agenda is the asset inventory and assessment, where DWI gave us about $250,000 in grant money, completely free, to look at all of the assets in our system and develop and continue to modify our 10-year CIP as we, continue to do projects, And as things continue to unfortunately break in the system, something moves down the list, something moves up the list, and what our next portion of the presentation will show is the things that Raftellus plugged into their model. Do we need to modify any of those at all? But it shows over the course of time how much money we're spending each year, and all of that is added in to showing what kind of impacts we are going to have to a single family residential home or to the business as we move forward, and what type of rate increase we should look at doing in order to accommodate the projects we are working on. So we're working hand in hand with both the consultant from the engineering project standpoint as well as the rate model consultant to make sure that we are not overreaching with our projects. We have the ability to pay, and understanding what those impacts will be to the various entities. And as Alan said, we have not done the increases that to the single family residential, because that was one of the things when we did the large increase several years ago, we determined that we did not need to do an increase on single family residential for a little while, let that kind of catch up with itself. And that's actually shown, that the recommendation was that we did not even do an increase. We did the large increase and then did 0%. Then it's suggesting that we start back with about a 5% increase as we move forward. The fact that some of our projects have been delayed by DOT in some cases, we're getting them out the door, we'll have to go back and adjust this to, show that instead of debt service hitting this year, it will. And so it's a constant adjustment of all the projects we're doing and the different models that we're working with.
So
It is, and one of the things that we'll be adding to this via Raftellus, of course, now is the system development fees that the board has implemented. And if the development comes, that will certainly have an impact on revenue as well, because of the system development fees coming in. And that was one of the impetus for us bringing that to the board and recommending that you adopt that. So that will be helpful, hopefully, in keeping rates from jumping significantly due to some of these projects that we're undertaking, hopefully.
So thank you. So I have two questions. Looking at what you've got here on the highlighted line, so is that based on an average use per household of 5,000 gallons?
Correct.
Those rates?
Correct.
Okay. So
That's the level the state, the funding agencies require us to look at. But obviously, if you use more or less, your rates will be different.
right. So if we, for everybody that's in on this, discussing the potential for a 5% increase, what we're looking at would be that increase, what we see on your table here in the blue line under the fiscal year 2019 of that 94.58. Yeah, fiscal. So that, because we show there's essentially been no increase, but there was no increase this past year. So basically what we would be looking at is an increase of combined for $90.63, popping up more or less to 94.58 combined for 5,000 gallons use.
Correct.
Okay, just want to make sure that we're all on the same page with that. And does the system development fees, do they have to be reserved very specifically for expansion and laying of lines to meet new development areas?
They can be utilized for debt service.
Okay. Thank you. Danny and Teresa, Ron, when he signed off, said he supported this. Do you have additional comments about all of this discussion and your recommendations.
I don't know that I have any questions at this time. I'm still trying to figure it all out.
No, I don't have any questions. I was interested in the debt service and
Yeah.
after being 20 years, I'm good with that. So I'm fine.
Okay. Teresa, do you have anything further to add at this point?
Has this already been included in our budget, the debt service part of this?
It would, our debt service, you may not have been in on some of the prior discussions. When a project occurs, we have approximately 2 to 3 years to do the project, and we work with us. They give us milestones to complete the project, and those are in that letter of intent to fund when they expect to see the project move forward. The first payment for the debt occurs no earlier than 6 months after the completion of the project and no later than 11 months after the project. And the debt service is paid in either May or November. So depending on when you actually complete the project, if you finish the project in June, you couldn't make the November payment, so you'd be circle around. You'd have 11 months after you finish the project till the following May before you made your first debt service payment. So it could be 3 to 4 years before this debt hits the city.
Okay, so where are we in this process now?
We have awarded the money, and the question is, do I move forward? And in order to adhere to the schedule they provided, is we need to get an indication from the board. Do we want?
You said you have the money. I missed a word there. You have
the Division of Water Infrastructure awarded us $6 million with a $500,000 principal forgiveness. And so our next step is to find a consultant and whether we want to look at a design build project like we're doing with Carr Lake, or just do a standard design bid build. Either way, we need to start the selection process for who will do this work.
Yes, ma'am. The next step in all of this is essentially formal acceptance of the offer by the Board of Commissioners. And that's why we're fleshing this out in committee format at this point in time, to basically take a recommendation from the committee to the full board about the offer that we've received from DEQ for this project. So that's really the next step.
And Ron said he was in favor, and I'm in favor.
Okay, and DEQ's, what was their offer again?
Total $6,062,000, with $500,000 being principal forgiveness grant, and the remainder being 0% interest loan for 20 years.
If I could ask a question, if we go ahead with this, and I'm in agreement, I'm not on the committee, but I'm in agreement with it, what time frame would we have in notifying the public entity that there will be an increase?
Well, water and sewer rate increases typically occur with the adoption of the budget. Since we did not adopt the budget, an increase with this year's budget, the next time we would look at whether or not those rates needed to be increased would be in the next fiscal year.
Okay, so we would have ample time to notify the public of it. Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And part of this conversation revealed the fact that, you're really not going to be impacted as far as making a debt service payment on this specific project and these funds for potentially 3 to 4 more years. So next year's decision on rates will really not be impacted by this. It'll be what we currently have and what we're taking on, and when those debt service payments for those projects begin hitting. And
Okay.
But, and I thank you for bringing that up, Pat, and I have two thoughts related to that. One of them is that this board could always make the decision if there was the desire to do a communication effort the way that we did many years ago when we were first discussing rate increases, even though that was a much more significant one. I think there was a lot of merit in holding some very public, let's explain to you everything that we've done
Yeah,
and we're
yeah.
doing. So there could be the opportunity if this board so chose to do something like that. And the other comment that I would make is looking at the Raftalis rate study and showing that they actually showed 5% every year. If there's an opportunity to do a rate increase and then have a pause versus waiting, and then you're going boom, you know, rate increase, that's always very painful for customers. So that's just a thought, even knowing that that's
Yeah.
down the line, that it might be preferable to have some space in between rate increases.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. I do not want to come to you and tell you you need to go up 40% or something along those lines.
Yeah.
Or little
No.
small steady
We
increases.
monitor it pretty darn closely here, and would prefer smaller incremental increases versus
Yeah.
large,
Exactly.
impactful.
Exactly.
because,
Exactly.
I understand the impact that has on the public, and that you guys represent the public, and they contact you and they contact us, and we certainly don't want that, and we want to keep them in mind, and only have as small an increase as is necessary, you know, to maintain our system as far as maintenance and operations, as well as meeting debt service requirements.
Right.
Well, I
Right.
remember, or I recall that our rationale to the public had more to do with eligibility for grants and eligibility for monies, millions and millions of dollars, or we wouldn't be eligible for that kind of money.
True.
This time around, when we do the increase, I guess we need to make sure that we can incorporate rationales for that 5% increase or whatever we end up having to do. So it seems to me that we probably need to start thinking about those reasons
Yes.
right now.
Yes.
Well, I think
Agreed.
absolutely. So does anybody, we've had, John, do you have anything else to add? Any comments?
The only comment I've got to make is I'm still concerned about the electrical building over at the wastewater treatment plant. I know it is in that floodplain, and we were very close this year. So that is a concern of mine, because that could affect the whole system. So that's just an effect. I'm worried about that.
Duly noted. We'll keep refining our approach and better understanding the funding methodology to take best advantage of funding that's out there and that is available. How long the emergency funding and the Asandra funds will remain, we don't know, but we'll do the very best that we possibly can.
Oh, I'm sure you will
maximize that opportunity.
It's just a concern that.
Gotcha. It's a concern of ours as well.
And it may be something when we do the plant expansion gets rolled into that project if we don't have an opportunity for other funding sooner. Because at that point in time, a lot of the items in the electrical building will, and one of the reasons we wanted to do it is because some of those items are aging, and we don't want, instead of doing maintenance to them or replacement where it's at, we want to just relocate the building and everything would be new. You know, so if we do a plant expansion at some point in the, future, that could be incorporated as part of it potentially. Or we may have another opportunity for some grant money before that.
Thank you. Okay, it seems like everybody's had an opportunity to speak. Teresa, at this point, is it too early for you to make a recommendation, or do you have a recommendation to go along with Ron and Danny's, either way?
I'm not sure what Ron's recommendation was. I stepped away for a second.
Okay, Ron, before he left, and then Danny added that they felt as committee members that they supported accepting this funding opportunity from the Division of Environmental Quality. So it would be a question of whether, as a committee member, you also support accepting the funding opportunity or no. Or no comment.
No, and this is the best offer we've had, or we've gotten, or this is as good as it gets.
This is as good as it gets.
Well, if it's as good as it gets, I'm in favor of good as it gets.
Yeah, we going back to what Kwan said earlier, that when we did the huge water rate increases in order to qualify, that is absolutely played out. We have qualified probably more than any other community in the state of North Carolina. We've gotten, this will put us over the top for $10 million in grant or principal forgiveness funds, and probably close to 20 million in zero interest loans. Amy, is that right?
If you can still see my screen, grant award is now over 11 million, over 20 million in 0% interest loans. And given the number of applicants, Bill, how many applicants did they have this year? 260?
Yeah, it was significant.
I think there was 260 applicants. And they awarded out of $78 million to get principal forgiveness or grant. You have to score in just about the top 10. And out of 260, they maybe funded 70. So, and most were loan only and at a had interest involved. So.
Well, I am definitely in favor of what's before us right now, then.
Great. So we're ready to move on to the next item on our agenda.
And it's time for me to stop sharing my screen and let Alyssa jump in there and add her screen for the presentation of the AIA reports.
And I do want to say, and I know that everybody agrees with me, that we are incredibly proud of the work that is being done by our engineering department and Bill and your folks and all the help that we've gotten. We know it takes a really great team, and we're tremendously proud that we are able to move forward on these really important projects. There's no way that Oxford can support additional investment without having an infrastructure in place to deliver utility services. So this is a heartfelt thank you, not just a casual one. Every day we see the work that's going on in the streets that our residents and customers believe is a pain in the neck, but I have no trouble telling them it is worth every moment. You all are really doing a great job. Thank you so much.
It's a lot of hard work, and I certainly appreciate McGill's assistance, because we've kind of gotten this down to a science, but it does take a lot of effort and a lot of time to make it happen.
Good deal.
All right, AIA, let's get there.
All right.
And just to give a little bit of a background while Alyssa's getting her screen up there is, as I mentioned earlier, the AIA grants were awarded to the city sometime back, and part of their process with the Division of Water Infrastructure for closing out the AIA grants and projects is to have this report adopted by the board and approved that we understand, we have gotten a lot of information, and this is what we want to use as a path moving forward as guidance in our future decisions for what projects to do and what we want to tackle next. And so I will let Alyssa take it away.
Okay. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. As Amy mentioned, my name is Alyssa. I'm an engineering associate with McGill Associates here. And today I'll be presenting to you about the procedure and results of the city's asset inventory and assessment project for the water and sewer utilities. So the purpose of this project was to update the city's capital improvements plan to reflect the current highest priority projects and provide accurate cost estimates. It's necessary that this document stays up to date in order to help you all with planning and to get points in applying for your funding. So the general guiding principles for evaluating the infrastructure was for sewer to reduce sanitary sewer overflows, reduce I&I to the wastewater treatment plant, and replace aged and failing sewer infrastructure. And on the water side, it was to reduce non-revenue water, replace aging water lines, and ensure reliable, high-quality service to your customers. So the sewer AIA involved flow monitoring, field assessments, eventually identifying and prioritizing projects to include in the CIP. And the water AIA involved a water audit, the creation of a water model, and identifying and prioritizing water projects to include in the CIP. So first, I'll go through the procedure for the sewer AIA. Initially, that involved flow monitoring with the purpose to determine the capacity, average daily flow, and wet weather flows within the system. To do this, we divided the city into 12 sewer sheds. So all of the sewage in one sewer shed flows down to one point of confluence. And at each of these 12 points, we recorded the flows every 15 minutes for 6 weeks from January to March 2018. And this did include 4 rain events. And we found that sewer sheds 7 and 9 peak flows used 50% of the capacity at that point of confluence. Sewer sheds 2 and 11 peak flows used 75% of capacity. Sewer sheds 1, 4, 9, 11, and 12 had the highest peaking factors. That would be the difference between your normal dry flow and when you have a storm. And sewer sheds 1, 2, 9, and 12 had your largest volumes of I&I. So that's these areas that are circled here. So a little bit of downtown area, some residential areas, some industrial areas, and those were the areas that were selected for further investigation. Next, we performed smoke testing, which involved putting a blower over the manhole, and pushing smoke through the gravity sewer system. You could then identify smoke emergences from places where they weren't supposed to be emerging. And the purpose of this testing was to identify, record, and mark locations of defects in the sewer line. So we smoked 60 segments of line, which amounted to 14 miles, or approximately 17% of the total system length. We found 127 abnormal smoke emergencies, including broken and uncapped cleanouts, just like this picture you see here in the bottom left, broken sewer lines, unsealed manholes, connected storm drains and culverts, like this one here, which are a big source of I&I, and some defects where we weren't sure exactly what was going on. And many of these issues that we noted have already been repaired, and in general, they influence the prioritization of the projects in the CIP. The next step of the AIA was video evaluations, where we used a push camera down sewer lines with the purpose to determine the locations and severities of the defects. So we video inspected 10 sewer main locations and 3 service locations that we had identified with the smoke testing. And we found locations of plugged inverts, cracked pipes, like what you see here, corrosion, root intrusion, offset pipe connections, like this one here, which is quite serious, and collapsed service lines, like this picture in the upper left-hand corner. And all of these locations is where you could potentially have water seeping into the gravity sewer system as I&I and overloading the city's infrastructure.
Alyssa, can you tell us what a plugged invert is, please?
Yes, a plug invert is when you have a location in your sewer system that you don't need that location any longer, and so you fill it up, but sometimes those can leak. And so we found locations where it's possible it might even be a connection between the gravity sewer system and the storm sewer system that had been plugged because you don't want that connection, but now it's starting to leak.
Thank you.
Cool. Next, we conducted manhole inspections with the purpose to inspect and evaluate the conditions of representative manholes. So we looked at 10 areas within the city representing the many decades of sewer construction and problematic areas identified by the staff. We inspected 38 manholes across these 10 areas for dirt wearing corrosion, gas residue and seepage, deteriorating bricks and poor patching, root intrusion, and misaligned pipes and obstructions. And we categorized these manhole conditions as good, fair, poor, and critical. So an example of a critical manhole would be this one here in the top right, where you see blockages, you see deteriorating bricks and mortar, severe corrosion from gas. Whereas this manhole here is a new concrete manhole in great condition. The rungs don't have any corrosion. The structure of the manhole is intact and has no corrosion. So those are some of the factors we looked for. And we were able to generalize our results from these 38 manholes into these 10 areas of the city to help us prioritize the projects for the CIP. Lastly, as part of this project, we inspected the city's 11 lift stations to evaluate the condition of the equipment. We visually inspected the wet wells, force mains, pumps, and electrical equipment, and we conducted drawdown testing to compare the pump's expected performance and its actual performance. We identified a number of lift stations where the pumps have an unexpected flow rate and other improvements that need to be made to the lift stations, either for safety reasons or performance reasons. And all of the sewer AIA fieldwork culminated in these recommendations, which included we updated the CIP, we reprioritized sewer line replacements based on our fieldwork. We identified high, medium, and low priority sewer lift station improvements related to safety and performance, and we updated the cost estimates for all of these projects. In the future, we recommend the city develops a flow monitoring program in high priority areas, develops a smoke testing program in high I&I areas to determine rehabilitation needs, inspects the sewer lines with the CCTV equipment, that was those video cameras, during routine cleanings to track conditions of lines, and continues to implement your capital improvements projects. So that was the, the sewer AIA side of things. Now, as part of the water AIA, that first included a water audit with the purpose to approximate the uses and losses within the system and determine the potential savings. So we used the American Water Works Association water audit software and determined that approximately 21.5% of the water the city purchased is lost. And that means about 2.5% could be going to unauthorized consumption, meter inaccuracies, or data handling errors, and about 19% is lost to water physically leaving the pressurized system. Now, hopefully a lot of the water line replacement projects you have now will make a dent in this, as it is a lot of the city's infrastructure. And so this 2.5%, if you could recover that water, amounts to about $280,000 in potential savings. And as part of this water audit, we also made recommendations to improve metering inaccuracies, to reduce metering inaccuracies, and thus reduce losses. As part of the water AIA, we also developed a water model with the purpose to guide decision-making for future projects. So this involves importing and reviewing the city's GIS. Then we calibrated the model. First, operationally, we discussed with staff to determine the system operating procedures, and that influenced telling the model when should booster pumps turn on and off, when should chlorine be put into the system and where. Next, we did hydraulic calibration, which involved going out into the field and conducting hydrant flow tests to ensure that the pressures we were seeing in the model matched the pressures that we're seeing in real life on the ground. And finally, we oversaw chlorine testing, likewise to ensure that the chlorine residual we're seeing in the model is matching the chlorine residual you're seeing in the ground. And this resulted in, we identified, once the model was calibrated, we were able to use it to identify line replacements that would increase chlorine flow throughout the city. And we also identified the need for a valve replacement and assessment and replacement program, as we determined that many of the city's valves do not close properly.
If I could just interject there, the model has assisted us several times already where our staff has experienced low chlorine levels, and they are and turn a valve off or turn a valve on, and it might take them half a day or 3 days to figure out if that was the correct method to improve the quality of the water, where I can call up McGill and ask them, can you run this scenario and see, and they say, you may want to go change, turn the valve off at Salem in the outer loop, and that should improve the quality of the water. Something that they can do in a matter of minutes might take us hours or days to figure out without having the model. So we have reached out since this model has been developed to assist us in things that, we were having to manually do previously.
Right.
Is it possible to go back to that earlier slide and tell us what was the difference between the different colors?
Yes, in general for the presentation, this is just a picture, representing what the model could look like. But it happens that the colors here represent chlorine flow throughout the system. And this is just one snapshot in time. It was really just meant to show you what the model looks like from my perspective. But the blue color is more chlorine in the system, green moderate, all the way down to red being you're just at the acceptable level there. So this is a tool that really helps us, especially with future projects, say, hey, if we loop this dead end and this dead end and continue the line, we can get a much better chlorine residual here. People will have much better quality water if that's the case.
Thank you.
One of the things that the model can do.
It's great.
Just to wrap that up, the recommendations from the water AIA included we reprioritized the water line replacements in the CIP and updated the current cost estimates. In the future, we recommend the city continue to update its mapping and modeling as you implement projects and upgrades, develop a valve assessment and replacement program, which could eventually take you to a unidirectional flushing program, develop a program for meter testing and replacement, implement annual water audits, and continue implementing your capital improvements projects. This concludes my presentation. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
Yeah, I have a question. Alyssa, does the COVID-19 pandemic affect is there something we should think about as a board relative to some of the things you've shared with us and the COVID-19 crisis we are in now, or not?
I'm not exactly sure I quite understand your question. Can you give me an example of something you might be concerned about that relates to the presentation and COVID?
Okay, well, when they talk about transmission of the virus and the pandemic we're in, they talk about particles in the air. They talk about sewage, that is a way that the virus can be transmitted. And I just threw that out there because that's in the news. And when you talk about water and you talk about sewage and you talk about things like it, I guess I'm thinking in a larger vein, what should people that are in positions like, commissioners and things think about as it relates to that pandemic and how it might affect, our water and our sewage and just some of the projects that we're working on now.
Right.
And yeah, I can say we're not epidemiologists, so I'm not gonna pretend to have a lot of knowledge base in that arena. But obviously this was also all initiated before COVID was even a thing. Although our presentation today has been delayed, we were all set to make this presentation when the orders came down to stay at home, and so we're just now being able to get to that with Zoom. But obviously you hear the headlines and read the same things, that there was concerns about the virus staying active in sewage and being transmitted through aerosols in sewage. So obviously the more you can do to keep all of that stuff contained where it's supposed to be inside the sewers, and having your manhole lids sealed and avoiding sewer overflows, all those things are good steps. I wouldn't want to dare venture a quantification of how that's going to impact the spread, but certainly the less contact people have with it, the better. So the more we keep it in the ground and get it to the plant, we're doing everything we can at that point.
Right. And I would add that it's also important, that you keep up the chlorine residual in your water system. One of the reasons for that is to kill pathogens. And hopefully that would mean that, COVID in water should not be an issue.
I think it's an excellent presentation. I didn't realize, I knew there was a study going on. I never realized the depth of work involved. And I think you've done great work. I mean, it's very enlightening as to what's going on. It's opened my eyes a little bit more, and now I can answer the public's questions about it. It's very enlightening. Now, thank you very much for the work.
Thank you.
Well, and we can certainly, if you, would like a little nighttime reading, forward you the reports in entirety. Alan may have done that, mere 93 and 175 pages for.
I saw that. Yeah, that's a lot. But I come down to City Hall and I'll pick a copy up because I would be interested. That's it's.
I'm good. You don't have to save me a copy.
That's why we brought in the, there's an executive summary and presentation so that everybody doesn't have to get down in the weeds like those of us that were involved. And
that works for me.
Shout out to Doug's staff because they assisted greatly in, making it possible for McGill to get the data that they did. And without their assistance, it would have not gone smoothly.
No, it's great. I think our Public Works Department, everybody involved, have done a tremendous job on this.
Yeah, and I will say that the quality of the work that we were able to do is directly tied to the quality of participation we had from the city. Not municipalities are as engaged as Oxford has been, and that really showed in final results.
Mm-hmm.
Appreciate it.
All right, we appreciate that as well. Our next step in this, I believe, is to bring it before the board for formal acceptance. Correct, Amy?
That's correct.
Yeah.
So unless anyone has any issues, or we'll bring this to you at the August board meeting.
Great.
Danny, Teresa, do you have any comments that you want to make with respect to bringing it before the board?
I'm fine.
I think it will give. Well, I was sitting here looking at the 175 pages and reading through some of it, and it is quite enlightening. So it would give us a chance to really review it and better understand all that is involved, and making sure that things are up to speed the way that they should be with regards to our water and sewer and stuff. So, yeah, it looks like interesting stuff.
Well, I would say if we were up to speed, we wouldn't be doing all of our projects, but it tells us where we are, do need to
Yeah.
make improvements.
Exactly.
And we're more
Yep.
up to
What it does
speed
is
than
give
we
us
were.
hopefully a roadmap to the future. That's
Right.
really what it does.
Mhm.
It gives us a snapshot of where we are and the challenges that we do have. And with that information, we're now armed to proceed in moving forward with this infrastructure initiative that we've undertaken and making the best decisions as we move forward.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Is
And
it
I've actually-
possible? Oh, go on, Teresa.
I mean, I've actually seen some of this stuff happening firsthand. I wish I could have seen more, Alan.
I'm sure they'll let you down in a ditch if you'd like.
Woohoo!
Get a hard hat and wear a mask, and we'll take care of you. We'll provide the shovel.
And a safety vest, we'll add that.
I
Yes.
have a couple of thoughts. One of them is it possible to email out the PowerPoint to the board to have? Because that's a wonderful, it adds additional information to the executive summary that you already sent us. I would also say if you could make at least one copy of each of the complete documents to have in the executive office in City Hall for anybody that wants to come in and thumb through it, that would be nice just to have available. And I also had a question with respect, and Alyssa, you answered most of it, but when you talked about the smoke testing for the sewer I&I, and you mentioned some of the issues were broken and uncapped cleanouts, unsealed manholes, and so on, and you said some of those things have been corrected. Obviously, some of them are bigger projects, and others seem like they're kind of a little more straightforward and affordable. Have we kind of acted on unsealed manhole covers and broken and uncapped cleanouts?
Mr. Frazier would be the one that has undertaken, his staff has undertaken correcting some of these issues. I believe that McGill provided him a list and they went through and knocked out the ones that were within their capabilities with our equipment and manpower to do.
Okay.
Well, and looking through the 175-page document, there's a lot of referral to the cost of correcting it. And I think you're about to answer who's doing the correcting, but some of these things are saying that they need to hire an arborist to evaluate a tree. I mean, how do we deal with all of these little variables that come into play? If a tree needs to be removed, do we have to go to the specialist?
It depends on, I guess, the level of involvement of the property owner and how attached they are to a particular tree. There are some property owners that I have approached about removing trees and can you take them out today? And then there are others that have indicated this was the tree that we had Sunday lunch under with my grandma 80 years ago.
But if it's impacting their water and sewer, they don't understand the problems that it presents for them as well as everybody else near them.
No, ma'am, some do and some don't. And I'll add this, that, oftentimes what we can do immediately is we'll send a root cutter, into the system and try to cut the roots out that way, but they'll grow back. If you don't take the tree out, they will grow back. It's a constant battle. It's a constant challenge. There is no system that I am aware of anywhere that exists that is 100% tight as far as a wastewater collection system. You have issues like this in varying degrees across different collection and distribution systems across the state and across the country. And do you need to get a handle on them? Yeah, you do as much as you possibly can. But another part of the equation is, again, making sure that you're getting the most bang for the buck that you're spending on doing inflow and infiltration work. So, the real battle is to identify your worst areas where the most water is getting in. And, you know, we back
Right.
up an hour ago when we were talking about some of the flows that we get into the wastewater treatment plant during these storm events. You know, we go from treating, okay, right now, while it has been dry, we're treating about 850,000 gallons a day. And back in May, when we were having just everything was soaking wet, saturated, and we were getting 1 and 2 inch rainfalls during the afternoons, we were getting, you know, 12, 13 million gallons coming in to our wastewater plant. So, you know, the real battle is identifying where we have those real significant issues and trying to address those. And every situation that you find to a different varying degree requires you to do something. How much is that in order to make that correction to it? Some of this stuff is, you know, underground. Some of it is over creek crossings.
Right.
Some of it is a cumulative effect across the
Right.
spectrum of all the pipe that you have in the ground of water seeping in. But, you know, when you have significant flows of I&I like we have when you have a storm event, we know we have areas out there that we need to identify where significant levels of water are getting in during the storm events.
Related to that, Alan, is the primary, I mean, it would seem on the face of it that the primary culprit would be where you have stormwater drains connected inadvertently to the sewer system. That just seems like, because we've all seen the water come rushing down the street into the storm drains. Is that the first area of attention, or is that just my simple brain not understanding the complicated aspects of this?
Those type scenarios that you're posing would be flushed out with the smoke testing. You'd have smoke coming out of your storm drains when we did the smoke testing. So those kind of areas are identifiable via smoke testing. And I'm sure we found some of those, and those are on the list. And we'll be addressing them based upon, you know, what monies that we have available and time and resources and all of those things. But again, you know, we are desirous of trying to reduce the amount of flows that come into our wastewater system, especially on the treatment end, because that affects our ability to grow in the future. I mean, if all of your capacity is being eaten up by stormwater flows coming in, your wastewater folks are sending in these reports basically on a monthly basis of how much wastewater we're treating. The folks in Raleigh are monitoring that, and it makes an impact upon our ability to grow in the future and where those allocations are going to come from to accommodate this new growth. And in my opinion, dealing with I&I to the best of your ability and investing dollars there, if you can impact it, is certainly preferable to going out there and spending $50 million, you know, to expand your plant.
Yeah.
You have a 3.5 million gallon permitted plant, and like I just said, when it's dry like it is now, you're treating less than 1 million. So, you know, it just seems kind of crazy to me to be expanding a plant to treat stormwater.
And
what is the capacity of our internal city staff in dealing with, or the percentage of these problems can our city staff currently address and correct or fix?
Well, certainly, and Dud can speak up here, you know, as well. Something like a clean out cap that is missing is well within our capabilities. When you start talking about possible storm drain interconnects to sanitary sewer, that becomes a much more complicated issue, possibly in how you have to remove it. If you can go in and plug an invert, as a question was put to Alyssa before about what's a plugged invert, that might be an easy fix. But if you have to go, you know, dig up a pipe that's 10 feet in the ground and physically do a disconnect and make sure, what's going to happen to the stormwater when you make that disconnect?
Yeah, exactly.
And so you can't just say, okay, let's go in and plug this without making sure that it's going to go elsewhere. And the smoke testing and the TVing of the sewer system, we didn't have an unlimited grant here, and we could only do, I think about 17% was smoke tested and, TV'd. So we have a lot of opportunities to, as the recommendations indicated, to do more of the same work that they did to identify more locations. And so that's something that we need to look into, whether or not we need to provide DUD with more staff and cameras and equipment, or do we hire a consultant or another outside entity to do this work? So this is something.
I guess I'm confused sometimes because I see all this new infrastructure that we're putting in place, the water, the sewer lines and all of that. So are we just merely identifying what the issues are and we just haven't gotten around to fixing them? Or eventually they will all get fixed with all the new lines and stuff that are going in?
We have approximately 80 miles of sewer and 90 miles of water. And the work that we are doing is touching a portion of that, but certainly not all of it. I don't actually have off the top of my head how many miles of storm drain we have that could also potentially need, well, not potentially, there is much of the storm drains that need work as well. They could have cracked pipe underground and things also. So we are tackling, and this is the point of doing the study, is what is the highest priority? What is most critical? Is a hospital affected? Is a school affected? How many customers are on this line? Is it just a dead end cul-de-sac when you're talking about water improvements? Where do we need to focus what money we do get? Because I was having a conversation right before this meeting with the contractor. Why didn't you just do this block, and this block at the same time? I said, well, when you win the lottery and give me the money to do that, I will be happy to do it in a logical, vicinity process instead of a highest priority, which is sometimes jumping around the city. So highest priority, and we'll continue to work on this, and it's a never-ending process. So you keep plugging away at the worst one, and then the next worst one, and the next worst one, and by the time you get all the way through the original list, you're back starting over at the beginning, because just like a roof, on a house, they only last so long, and they have to be replaced periodically.
Excellent. Teresa, are you good with your questions?
I think so. I'll call Amy.
Okay.
Okay. Danny, do you have any further questions as a committee member?
No, I'm good. I'm ready.
Okay.
Adjourn.
Okay, and just
Actually, I gotta
Quan,
run, so I'm leaving.
okay, thank you. Quan and John and Pat, do you have any questions?
I just had a comment when Teresa was making reference to about the tree removal. And being on the board the years I've been on, a lot of our constituents only concentrate on their water. They very rarely think about their sewage and what entails to removal of the sewage. That's not, you hear people say, my water bill is so high, my water bill. Some of them, I don't think they even look down that line and see the word sewage. Amy got me the first year I was on the board when she brought us a slide and showed us our pipes. And I think I've been nauseated ever since then at the condition of a lot of our pipes and sewage system is a lot of our constituents never think about the storm water, the runoffs. They're not aware that it costs money for all of this water and sewage and all to go places. So I think the more we educate our public on why we're doing what we're doing and how we're doing it, the less headaches Alan will have, and the less headaches we'll have. It was just a general comment. Again, and thank you, Amy, and your staff and your team for all the long nights and the gray hair that you all are acquiring and putting forth an effort for the city of Oxford. Thank you.
I am
Yeah,
sorry.
this is serious.
Excellent. Does anybody have anything else to say? I think we've got a recommendation to we've already agreed to put it on the agenda, and with a hope for some printed materials available and to email out the PowerPoint, which was really great. Alyssa, thank you very much. Are there any more comments? Any more business? All righty then. Then drink water, stay cool, and thank God that we have running water and evacuated sewage. And,
Amen.
and kudos
Thank you,
to
everyone. We
everybody.
appreciate it. It's been a long meeting, and we appreciate it. I hope it was informational, educational, a lot of information, and a lot of information was disseminated via email. If you have any questions, please contact us. We'll answer them individually to the very best of our ability. And if you have questions between now and the board meeting, you can ask them then too. So thank you very much. I do want to thank
Thank you.
McGill for joining us this afternoon. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Yes,
Good work.
thank you, Elisa.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Great
Meeting
job.
adjourned.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.